Let's get straight into this with my first guest. Joining me is political journalist John Fund. John, thanks for coming back to the U.S. Report. I want to get to the impeachment inquiry in a moment, but first the news that Hunter Biden was indicted. What do you make of it, and do you think that there's something to the fact that they only chose to indict him on the one charge that couldn't come back to haunt Joe Biden?
Well, James, you've hit on it. The gun charge is something that is going to be shaky in court because there are Supreme Court precedents that indicate that if you're a nonviolent felon, you may not perhaps have your gun rights taken away from you. And that's basically what he's been charged with. So it's a shaky charge. In addition, I think that it's a way of changing the subject. The tax charges, which are very serious and easily proven, are about to expire on the statute of limitations. So if they can string out this gun charge until the courts resolve whether or not it's on solid ground, the tax charges may go poof. And of course, by then we will have had the 2024 election, and Joe Biden will have either been reelected or, I suspect, be in retirement for one reason or another, and the whole thing will go away and be forgotten by everyone.
And, John, I want to move on to the other big news, of course, which is Kevin McCarthy announcing that impeachment investigation inquiry. Now, we've seen these sorts of things fizzle in the past, and also on the Republican side, people like Matt Gaetz have said that they want to see more action from Kevin McCarthy. Where do you think this is going? Do you think this has any prospect of success? I think it's important that they do it to start getting things out in the open. John Fund, your take.
Well, I think Kevin McCarthy moved right now because he's under enormous pressure regarding the federal budget negotiations, whether or not there's going to be a government shutdown, to offer something to his more radical members in the House Republican caucus, and the impeachment investigation and move fits that bill. I'm skeptical about whether or not impeachment is a good idea. I think hearings on impeachment, which would bring all the evidence out, and I think perhaps force a few media outlets to begin to look at the evidence that you just cited in your report, would be appropriate. But remember, we're only a little more than a year away from an election, and there is a practical issue here. James, the big story in Washington, besides the one you mentioned, is that the Democratic establishment is now moving against Joe Biden in a big way. His favorite newspaper columnist, Joe Biden has identified this as David Ignatius of the Washington Post, called on him to leave the race, to not run in 2024. That was followed by other liberal columnists picking up the same cry. And we all know that that didn't come from their own fevered brain. It came from that of Democratic donors and Democratic leaders. Nancy Pelosi herself was notably unenthusiastic about either Joe Biden or Kamala Harris running in 2024 this week. So all of this has to be looked in the background of the Democratic Party preparing to try to jettison or bully or shove Joe Biden out of the race in 2024, which would change the calculus for everyone politically.
So, John, do you think then that the bat signal has gone up? And who exactly is sending that signal? I mean, as you say, you don't suddenly have this whole confluence of very influential columnists all saying the same thing, all singing from the same sheet, without some sort of memo going around saying, hey, I think this is what's going to happen here.
Well, every Democratic dinner party in Washington, D.C. and New York, which is the home of the Democratic donors, for months has featured discussions about, how can we possibly take the risk of Joe Biden running again? Think about this. We saw this incredible news conference in Vietnam where Joe Biden was alternately inarticulate, insulting to his Vietnamese hosts, and then his own staff basically had to end the news conference while he was still answering questions. This is someone who's in the beginning signs of what you described earlier, probably dementia. In addition, Joe Biden is physically frail. If he had a moment similar to that which accompanied Mitch McConnell recently, where he simply froze in front of a camera for 20 seconds, game over. And at what point of the campaign would that happen and basically render Biden politically dead meat? So I believe that they cannot take the risk. What if you have pictures there of Joe Biden falling down? Well, what if he doesn't get up the next time he falls down? There are too many risks here. Too many risks. Now, the Republicans, of course, have their own problems, but remember, the Democratic consensus view is Biden can beat Trump. He beat him once, in their opinion, that he can do it again. But can he really? Look at the polls. The polls show Trump performing equal or ahead of Biden. So I think the Democrats cannot take the risk for the next 14 months that something dramatic doesn't happen to show to the American people that Joe Biden is, shall we say, going into a slow fade.
Yeah, and I mean, just on polls, too, we've also seen polls saying that large numbers of Americans, 61%, I think, according to CNN, think Biden was involved with Hunter's business dealings while serving as vice president, and 42% who think that he acted illegally. Does this also add a further complication for the president and his team insofar as, you know, they can't start, if they're running against Donald Trump, say, oh, well, you know, this guy here, he's corrupt, when people are thinking this about them?
We may see much more evidence come forward. We already saw an FBI official come forward this week and say that, yes, indeed, the prosecutor in the Hunter Biden case was not given full cooperation from the Justice Department and could not bring certain charges, was not allowed to. So if that continues, then the story, despite the media's reluctance to cover it, may force itself onto the national stage. In addition, James, one other point. This confluence of events, I think, can accelerate. Right now, Joe Biden is being given a gentle shove out the door. His friends are telling him, you know, you've done your job, you saved the country from Trump, you've transitioned us to a clean energy future, time to take your gold watch and go on. If Biden doesn't listen, Biden continues to want to run, he risks two things. One, he risks, I think, perhaps Robert F. Kennedy Jr. embarrassing him in the Democratic primary in New Hampshire, much as Lyndon Johnson was with Eugene McCarthy in 1968. He also risks the Democrats finally saying, you know, this Hunter Biden thing, there may be something there. Maybe we actually have to look at this. Maybe we should, rather than automatically oppose every Republican hearing on Hunter Biden, maybe we should actually participate the way that Republicans did with the Senate Watergate hearings in 1973, which eased Richard Nixon out of office. But Joe Biden, if he persists in running for a second term, may find the Democrats discovering that there is perhaps elements of concern in the Hunter Biden story they hadn't detected before.
Very interesting. John Fund, thank you so much for your analysis. Very much appreciated.